Adam, and it's been sort of an awful week for everybody. So today I'm going to read a book called Dear Millie, and just so you know, this book always makes me cry, but I feel like today might be a day for a good cry anyway, so we're going to go for it. It's Dear Millie by Maurice Sendak. There once was a widow who lived at the end of a village. All she had in the world was a little house and the garden that went with it. Her children had died, all but one daughter, who she loved dearly. She was a dear, good little girl who was always obedient and said her prayers before going to bed, and in the morning when she got up. Everything she did went well. When she planted something in her little garden patch, a clump of violets or a sprig of rosemary, it took root so well that you could see it growing. When danger threatened the little girl, she was always saved, and her mother often thought in her heart, "My child must have a guardian angel who goes everywhere with her, even if the angel cannot be seen." But it was not God's will that the happy life they led together should continue, for a terrible war overran the whole country. One fine, clear day, when mother and child were sitting together outside the house, a great cloud of smoke rose up in the distance, and a little while later the heavens resounded with cannon fire. Shouts and tumult rent the air on all sides. "Great God," cried the mother, "what a fearful storm is coming! Dear child, how shall I save you from the wicked men?" And in her great fear she decided to send the child into the forest where no enemy could follow. "Come," she said, putting out a piece of cake left over from Sunday in the child's pocket. "Come, child, I will take you to the forest, then go straight ahead until you are quite safe. Wait 3 days and come home. God in his mercy will show you the way." She took the child to the edge of the forest, kissed her, and let her go. You can imagine how the child felt at being left all alone. She went deeper and deeper into the forest. The wind blew wildly in the tops of the fir trees, and when thorns took hold of her dress, she was terrified, for she thought that wild beasts had seized her in their jaws and would tear her to pieces. The woodpeckers, crows, and hawks screamed furiously, and at every sharp step sharp stones cut her feet. She trembled with fear, and the farther she went, the heavier grew her heart. The sky clouded over, every trace of blue disappeared, and the storm wind buffeted the branches so hard that they cracked. In the end, the dread in her heart grew so great that she could go no further, and she had to sit down. She said to herself, "Oh, dear God, help your child to go on." If you haven't read this book, the pictures are very good, but they'll make you cry. Just as she had expected, she felt lighter at heart. Rain began to fall, and she took comfort and said, God and my heart are weeping together." There she sat until the shower had passed. When she stood up and looked at the sky, she saw little fleecy clouds, and the evening sun was shining on them. And she thought, God is feeding his sheep with roses. Why would he forget me? So she started off again. Now she was easy in her mind and believed it was her guardian angel who had unseen guided her over cliffs and past deep chasms. For how otherwise could she have come through safely? Most likely the angel had instructed a white dove to fly ahead of the child and show her the way. At nightfall, she came to a plain where there were no more thorns and no sharp stones, but only soft moss and grass, which soothed her bruised feet. Then one by one the stars came out, and looking up at them, the child said, "How bright are the nails on the great door of heaven! What a joy it will be when God opens it up." Then suddenly a star seemed to have fallen to the ground. As the child came nearer, the light grew bigger and bigger, and at length she came to a little house and saw that the light was shining from the window. She knocked at the door, and someone cried, "Come in." When she went in and looked around, she saw an old man sitting there. He said in a friendly voice, "Good evening, dear child. Is it you? I've been expecting you a long time." He had a snow-white beard that reached down to the ground, and he looked most venerable and kind. "Sit down, dear child," he said. "You must be tired. Sit in my little chair by the fire and warm yourself." And when she had warmed herself, he said, "You must be hungry and thirsty. I shall give you clear water to drink, but all I have to eat is a few roots that grow in the woods, and you will have to cook them." The little girl took the roots, scraped them neatly, cooked them over the fire, and added a piece of the Sunday cake, which made them taste good. When the dish was ready, the old man said, "I'm hungry. Give some to me." The good child gave him more than she kept, but after eating what was left, she felt full. When they had finished eating, the old man said, "You must be sleepy now. I have only one bed. You sleep in it." "Oh no," said the child. "A little straw on the floor will be soft enough for me." But the old man picked her up in his arms and put her down on the bed and covered her. Then she said her prayers and fell asleep. Early the next morning, when she opened her eyes, the old man was sitting beside the bed, and the sun was shining gloriously through the window. "Dear child," he said, "you must get up now and go out to your work and wait for us to eat." She went happily outside, where she heard more birds singing than she had ever heard before, and the flowers round about were so big and beautiful that she had never in all her life seen anything more splendid. But I suppose you would like to know who the old man with the white beard in the hut was. It was Saint Joseph, who long ago had cared for the Christ child here on earth. He had known that the good little girl would come to him and had taken her under his protection. It was because he didn't want her to be idle that he had sent her out to work. All of a sudden she was wandering about in the meadows, and under the trees another little girl was standing beside her. The other little girl took her by the hand and showed her where to find the best roots and helped her dig them up. When they had had enough, the other little girl played with her, picked flowers for her, and was very sweet and kind. This little girl had lovely black hair and a pretty red dress and looked just like the poor little girl, except that her eyes were larger and brighter, and she may have been even more beautiful. I'm fairly sure it was her guardian angel who was allowed out here in the woods to let the little girl see her. Again the child cooked the roots and herbs they had gathered and put in a second piece of her Sunday cake, and again St. Joseph ate with her. The third day was no different. As soon as she went outside, the other little girl was there, and they played together in pure joy and glory. Hour after hour went by, and time never hung heavy on their hands. The sky was always bright, and there was never a cloud to be seen. And on the third day, when the child had given up her last piece of cake and the old man had eaten again with her, he said to her, Dear child, you must go back to your mother now. Your time here is over." I always cry. "Yes," she said, "I'll be glad to go to my mother, but I'd also like to come back here soon." At that, St. Joseph handed her a rosebud and said, "Never fear. When this rose blooms, you will be with me again." The other little girl, who was waiting outside the door, took her by the hand and said, "I will lead you by a shorter way. You will be with your mother soon, and you will find the going hard." They started out together, and in places where the little girl could not make her way, the guardian angel helped her. But in the end, she grew so tired that she had to stop. "Oh, if only I had something to refresh me, so I don't faint away before I get to see my mother." At that, the guardian angel plucked a white cup-shaped flower that we call bindweed and poured in a few drops of red wine, which revived her and made her strong again. These flowers have little red stripes ever since. At the end of the forest, the guardian angel pointed to the village and said, "There you will find your mother. She was sitting outside the house thinking of you." "Go now. From here on, you won't be able to see me." The child went to the village, but it looked strange and unfamiliar to her. In among the houses she knew, there were others she had never seen before. The trees looked different, and there was no trace of the damage the enemy had done. All was peaceful. The grain waved in the breeze, the meadows were green, and the trees were laden with fruit. But she had no trouble recognizing her mother's house, and when she came close, she saw an old woman with a bowed head sitting on the bench outside the door, enjoying the last rays of the evening sun that hung low over the forest. The old woman looked up, and when she saw the little girl, she cried out in joyful amazement, "Ah, dear child, God has granted my last wish, to see you once again before I die." She kissed her and pressed her to her heart, and then the little girl heard that she had spent 30 years with Saint Joseph in the forest, though to her it had seemed like 3 days. All the fear and misery her mother had suffered during the Great War had passed her by, and her whole life had been just one joyful moment. Her mother had thought wild beasts had torn her to pieces years ago, and yet deep in her heart she had hoped to catch at least a glimpse of her just as she was when she went away. And when she looked up, there stood the dear child wearing the same little dress.